Hello there, I am Gifty Auntie and welcome to TSP with Gifty Auntie.
Who can deny Gifty?
No.
I don't think anyone shall. Thank you for having me.
Hello there, I am Gifty Auntie and welcome to TSP with me. Now, if you follow me or TSP page on any of the social media platforms, you would know by now that June is the month you've been waiting for. And being the first Sunday, the first episode in June, we bring you the very best. The very best. I'm so excited. Can't you see I'm wearing my Sunday best? My guest today, amazing, phenomenal woman. We haven't had somebody of that caliber on the show yet, so it means the world to me. She's a woman of many firsts. The first female vice president of Liberia. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. You heard it right. The first female vice president of Liberia. Former First Lady, twice Senator, Vice President. Now, what's she up to? Today, we are here to capture the untold story of Her Excellency, Dr. Jewel Taylor. Help me welcome this amazing woman to TSP with Gifty Auntie. Woo! Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you for the warm welcome.
It's good to have you here.
I'm honored.
Ghana is second home to you.
Definitely.
I know, right? So it's good to have you here. Kindly take your seat and I'll join you in a minute. Before I join you, let me say thank you to Adipa Fabrics for my fabric. My outfit is by Liran Collection. Thank you so much to them. My hair is by Insula G8. Makeup, The Global, and then of course beads and bold earring by Twinny Craft. We'll be back. You know you need to call somebody to tune in, right? Yes, we'll be back. Welcome back to TSP with Gifty Auntie. And yes, we've been blessed. Our studios have been blessed with the presence of Her Excellency, former Vice President of Liberia, elected Vice President of Liberia, former First Lady, twice a Senator, Vice President. And what are we going for next? Don't tell her. Maybe we must go for the presidency. What do you think? And we'll talk about that later. But again, let me officially welcome our sponsor to the TSP with Gifty Auntie. That's the Old Mutual Retirement Salary Plan. Amazing. I had my first alert in May. Because I joined it, I didn't have any retirement, proper retirement plan, but thank God for them. Old Mutual Retirement Salary Plan. The new order of retirement is here. Now you can retire on your own terms with a guaranteed monthly income for the rest of your life. Yes, the rest of your life. Simply invest a lump sum into the Old Mutual Retirement Salary Plan today and start receiving monthly income to enjoy the perfect retirement. It's that easy. The best part is you get to enjoy added benefits of an annual increase every single year. Call Old Mutual on 050-453-4333, 050-453-4333, or visit www.oldmutual.com or simply dial *789*01# to request a call. Obrapa ahonto enkwa. Who doesn't want this? During your retirement. I mean, from now, and it's for everybody 50 years and above. And if you're below 50, you can do it for your parent as well, so that every month they can get some money coming in, money that they can put to good use. Again, we say thank you to Venant Mineral Water for their support. Venant Mineral Water has a balanced pH level. It has all the right minerals in it. It's low in sodium, and they believe in giving back to society by changing lives and sharing love wherever they find themselves. They also produce Be Good drinks, and we are grateful to them. And on my set today, let me turn my attention to my special guest. For my year has been blessed, the amazing, phenomenal former Vice President, former First Lady of Liberia, former two-time Senator, and former Vice President. What a journey. Your Excellency, welcome to TSP with Gifty Auntie.
Let me say thank you for this honor. I've heard about you in many circles across Ghana, and everyone speaks so highly about you. I'm honored to actually have an opportunity not just to meet you as we met yesterday at the African Women's Leadership, but also to come and spend a little time with you and to glean from your beauty and your amazing journey.
I'm tapping in. The first time I met you was during an AWDF, African Women in Development Fund, African Women Development Fund, AWD with BC. They had a program here in Ghana, and you graced the occasion. You were with, I think, Madam Joyce Banda also came. Yeah, I saw you from afar. So yesterday, coming close to you, I was like, wow. And when you agreed to come on the show, I was like, this woman is really somebody determined to change the story.
But who can deny Gifty?
No.
I don't think anyone can deny an opportunity. You're so passionate about what you do. You're down to earth, and you speak to the issues that are important to all of us, not just the women. And so for me, it's an honor to have had such an opportunity.
Thank you. Your Excellency, how would you sum up your journey so far?
Walking on Fire. And that is the name of my book. I'm working on it.
Okay.
I hope within the next year it will be complete. Because I've wasted a long time, and now the events that have happened are so many. I'm trying my best to put the full story together, but it's been like walking on fire.
Maybe you have to do part 1 to 10.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll do part 1, and then when everybody is expecting, then the big stories come in the end. You're right.
Because you've had a journey, from a simple married woman to becoming a First Lady of Liberia.
It's been a long journey. I became First Lady at 33 years old. I'm now 61. So you can imagine how many years. And being
you had been married for how many years?
For about a year, when Charles Taylor became president of Liberia.
Wow.
So I married him as someone I loved, and not thinking he would be president. But then God has his own ways, and he twists and turns our life how he sees fit. All of us learn when we are growing up by our mothers that you must always be prepared for whatever opportunities come your way, good or bad. You kind of go through it and you go with the flow. But it's not always easy.
Right.
And women standing up in places of high trust is always a difficult journey. But I've learned that when you're up on that stage, you have to just keep moving, because there's so many people at the back, some looking, some cheering, some wishing you would fall, but the fact of the matter is that you must do your very best so that at the end, your story is a good one. And I think this is what stories like mine and many other women like me across the globe do. We bring inspiration, we bring lessons learned, and we bring courage and determination. And I think that's why a platform like yours is so very important.
But were you prepared for that role as the First Lady?
Never. When I grew up, I wanted to be the governor of the central bank. That's the job I wanted. To sit on the country's money and to make sure it would be spent only in areas that would lift Liberians. And during the years that I was growing up as a high school and college student, there were so many issues. The central bank had become a bank for the president's office. So the funding that came into the country was used haphazardly and however they seemed fit. And so I made up my mind that I would do banking and I would sit at the central bank and I would be able to look, of course, during those days we didn't have female presidents. So I would be able to look that male president in the face, whoever he would be, and say, this money is not for that purpose. I didn't get the chance to do that, but that was my hope.
Do I get the impression that you were a student leader?
No, I wasn't. In fact, my dream was to become the governor of the central bank. Now, I'm growing up in the age of 1980 when the coup had taken place. President Talbot, the sitting president, had been killed. A new form of government came into place. And they used the central bank as the bank for the president. And so while I was doing economics at the University of Liberia, I said, this isn't fair. The central bank is a development bank. It shouldn't be used for the whims and caprices of a president. And so I determined that early on, I was 18 at the time, that I would be the governor of the central bank. So I would be able to sit at the central bank and tell the president, a male president, I'm sorry, Mr. President, this is not what the money is for. I never got a chance to do that because God has his own ways. And somehow he pulls you in the direction that he wants you to go. And so I didn't become a student leader. I just went to school and did my lessons and came home. In fact, a funny story is the day I went to the university for the first time. And I told my daddy, I said, we're going to school today, you know, we have to register. And he brought me $250 US. That was the tuition for a semester at the time. And as I took the money from him, he said, what are you going to study at the university? And I said, I don't know, Daddy. They'll have orientation, and we'll talk about the different subjects, and then I'll make up my mind. At that point, they didn't have banking and finance. They only had economics and finance and management. So my choices were not that many. And so I said, I'll see you later, and I walked out the door, and then he called me back. He says, what are you going to study? I said, Daddy, I don't know. I'll go and I'll figure it out. Excited to get on the university campus. He said, okay, and he called me back the third time. I said, hey, Daddy, what is it now? He says, you cannot do political science at 18. And I was, political science? Mind you, we're in the middle of crisis. A coup has taken place. People have been killed. The army is now in control. We're under a military government. Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf had been arrested. So all of the strong voices in politics had somehow been silenced. And here's my father looking at me and saying, you cannot do political science. I was like, wow, are you okay? Not in my future or present plans. I said, no, I'm not going to do political science. As a result of what my father said, I went to the university and I didn't join any of the clubs, not one. I just went to class and I came home. Never did I imagine that I would have ended up a politician.
So you were initiated into the whole politics, thanks to marriage.
That's it.
You know, thanks to my
being thrust into the political field.
What kind of first lady would you say you were? Were you very much involved?
For the first 2 years, I thought being a first lady was to take care of my husband, host his guests, and take care of our children. So for the first time in many years, I didn't work. So I didn't have an office. I didn't do anything. I sat home, and I was bored because I had come from the U.S. And I've worked for many, many, many years. I had been working since I was 21. And so now I find myself, you know, staying home and not having anything to do. One day I went to visit my mother-in-law. My mother had been in the States for a while, and so only my mother-in-law was there. So I had this conversation with her, and she's like, what are you doing? I said, nothing. And I said, I'm bored. She says, well, let's pray. You take 3 days, and I'll take 3 days fast, and we'll gather up together on Sunday evening, and then we'll see what God is saying. So I took the 3 days of fast, and the only thing that came to my mind was find something to do. So on Sunday, I went and I sat with her, and I said, but what did God tell you? She said, what did God tell you? I said, no, you tell me what God told you first. She said, God says you should start doing something. I said, that's exactly what he told me. So I told my husband, I'm going to open my office. And by that time, the war was raging. Displaced camps were being set up across the country. And I decided I would go and visit displaced camps. And just something dropped in my spirit. And not knowing that that would have been a stepping stone for all of the political work that I did. So I got involved in, I created this agency called the National Humanitarian Task Force. And so we went from displaced camp to displaced camps, taking women to the hospitals that were needed to have medical care, providing blankets and food items and all kinds of stuff. So I was busy every month. It took me 3 weeks because I went to every camp myself. And that was because the first day I said, well, I'm Miss Boss Lady. And I'm just going to send the food and I'll wait and see what happens. So the food goes out and no report.
Doesn't go
what's
to the
going
right people.
on? They just divided it at their homes and came back and said, oh, Madam First Lady, of course, I'm younger than a lot of these women.
Yeah.
And they said, we've divided the food, but then I keep listening to the radio. People are still crying. There's no food here. We haven't had food for weeks. I said, But I was younger and I couldn't call them and berate them. So I said, okay, I have a solution to this problem. When we're doing the distribution every month, I will be ahead of the team. So I will get into my car and get the truck behind me and we'll go from place to place. And I will physically stand in the line and divide rice. I took the line for the people who were blind, the women who were pregnant, and people who were a little ill because they couldn't stand in the long lines. And I always would give them a little bit more because they were already at a disadvantaged point. And that is how I started a work that I thought was just a humanitarian work, but kind of eased out into politics. Because 2023 comes around and my husband is asked to leave the country. We all go into exile in Nigeria, and then I come back and there are elections. And I hear Ellen Johnson Sirleaf say, women, come on board. We need more women. It is time for the women.
And you jumped on board.
Not easily. People kept saying, oh, with what you've done in the 6 years you were in the office of the first lady, before I said the office of the vice president, it would be good for you to come on board. And I'm like, nah. My father told me I was not a politician. It took an uncle of mine who was senator at the time and was retiring. He says, no, I think you will be a very good senator, and we're going to make sure you win. So in my naivete, I said, okay, if you guys are going to make me senator, then I don't have to do anything. Again, I'm not a political scientist. I've never gotten involved in the political process. I have no clue. And so I think I'm going to sit home and everything is going to come to me. So when they started the process, over a 1-year period, I visited the county only 3 times. And I remember them asking, where is your photograph? I said, which photograph? Do we have to do photographs? I went and did a black and white photograph and I sent it. And they're like, oh God, what is wrong with this woman? I said, but you guys say you're going to make me senator now, so I'm supposed to sit home and it's just going to walk to me. Behold, it was not what it was, but God just gave me that platform because I didn't go more than 3 times. I was called to the debate. Fortunately, I had seen a lot during the 6 years as First Lady. And I had an education outside of Western education, so I had a clue about some of the ideas of what was happening. So I was able to sail through the debate. And I went and cast my ballot, Gifty, and I went home, shut my phones off, and went to bed. I said, this was just an experience. I think for the next run, I had the second highest number of votes in the entire process.
Wow.
So that was a God moment. It
was a God movement, definitely. And I'm sure God started it with the humanitarian work, so the people had seen that. But let's go back a bit. Exile in Nigeria.
Well, in 2003, we were preparing for second round of elections. The president was going for his second term. Yeah. And all kinds of political shenanigans came into play. And the U.S. president at the time, George Bush Jr., said Charles Taylor has to leave the country and he has to leave now. So we're forced into exile. We didn't want unnecessary war. More people would have gotten killed because almost the entire country was now in Monrovia, in school buildings, in church buildings, in anywhere, any open building that people could find a space to put a mattress and to sleep. And he thought if he would insist on remaining president, more people would have died. So he made that choice that he would go into exile.
Were you at any point accused in your campaign, accused of watching on as women and children were molested and, being killed and raped and all that? Because in politics, we know that anything and everything can be thrown at you.
Well, I was lucky that I got involved in the humanitarian work. And it was about a 3.5-year period that I got involved in this work. And I think that set the basis for what the legacy would be. So people saw me as someone helping, making a difference. And so throughout my long 27-year career, I've never had anyone throw that at you.
Yeah. But what snapped in you when you got into exile? leaving your home, the home you've known, the office you've been as First Lady, and now living, I'm sure, as a former First Lady, you'll be giving all the kids, but it was never the same.
No, because it wasn't home.
It wasn't home.
And you had to leave everyone. Now I went into exile with one cousin and some of the relatives of Mr. Taylor, but none of my family members accompanied me. So that was the first hitch, that my siblings were scattered all over, some in America, some in Liberia, some in other parts of the world. But I felt lonely. But the work that I had done as First Lady, I think a seed had been planted. And I felt, what am I doing here in exile and not impacting my country in the way that I should? I felt that my destiny hadn't even started.
Right.
Without knowing what would have happened, I knew that I had to go back to Monrovia. And I tried in every way I could. And finally, after about a year and a half, I ended up in Monrovia.
Yeah. So
without knowing what the next steps would be.
Yeah.
At that point, there is a transitional government.
Yeah.
There was a 2-year transitional government. So everyone was still in a state of confusion. Where does the country go? What are we going to do?
Right.
Are we going to have elections? Are we going to continue in this transition? Right. So everything was a little bit up in the air, and no one knew for certain how we would have gone forward. So it was in the midst of that I decided that being home was better than being in exile.
Yeah. Did you at any point feel like, what has this man gotten me into? I married you for love. You said you'll be president. I decided to support you. Now, did you get that into that moment?
Of course, because there was a lot. Now, mind you, I met Mr. Taylor when I was about 19 years old at the University of Liberia. So I'd known him as a regular man. Because the president was haunting him, they wanted to have him killed, and he ran into exile.
Right.
I hadn't seen him for a long period. He had all these years of going as a rebel leader and leading the rebellion at the time. So a lot has happened between the two of us, a lot of space, a lot of time. And so when we finally got married, for me it was like, I'm marrying the father of my son, and this is going to be a nice marriage.
Okay. So you already had a son with him before he went into exile.
Yes.
Okay.
So for me it was, all of the women who have children want to be married to
the father of their
children.
Yes,
and so for me, I was happy doing that. Nobody ever believed. I don't think he believed that he would have been president, because at that time the slogan was, "Those who bring war and crisis cannot lead." And so it was being said in all of the corridors that those who had been a part of the conflict would not be allowed into the electoral process. So for me, it wasn't an issue. I never believed he would be president.
Yeah.
Was
there objection from your family when you decided you're going to marry him?
No,
knowing
not
that
really.
Was a rebel leader.
Not really. Funny thing, not really. My mother was called, who lived in the U.S. at the time, and of course, you will want. I think all mothers hope that their daughters will marry the men that they have children by. And she just asked him 2 questions. Are you marrying her because you love her, or are you marrying her because you need her? And he says, no, I'm marrying her because I love her. And she says, okay, if that is the case, then I don't have an issue. So all of the things that had happened, my parents had been in the war, my mother and father during the crisis. They were healthcare professionals, and so they lived in the areas that were controlled by Mr. Taylor, and so they knew him. Of course, he's the father of their grandchild, so they had a relationship already. And the fact was that the war had now ended, and people were moving forward.
Your Excellency, you made a statement that I want us to dwell on a bit. Your mother asked him, are you marrying her because you love her or you need her? What's really the difference? For the young woman who wants to achieve, want to push, want to go somewhere, seeking to get married, what's the difference for? What should it mean to her?
In politics, I've learned over the years that there's a difference between actually loving someone and needing them. A politician could go into a constituency and they want to get elected, so they need the constituency, and they make all these glorious promises just to get elected. And most of them, especially the males, Once they get elected, they say, well, we paid our money for you to vote for us, so we don't need, I don't have to do anything else.
For you.
But if you love something, you go beyond just that. And for me, I think that's the point she wanted to make. You're now on the verge of a lot of things. Nobody knew how the whole thing would end. And she wanted to know for real whether it was real love, because she knew that would survive whatever circumstances that we went through. And so she wanted to be she wanted to be sure.
Weren't you scared yourself?
Yes, I was. Because coming into the country after I had been in the U.S. for a while, looking at the situation and seeing how things had turned out, and this conversation was happening while we hadn't gotten married yet. I was now the deputy governor of the central bank. At least I kind of...
You got close.
I got kind of close to where I wanted to be.
Right.
And looking at my own dreams and aspirations, I was hoping that he would just be a regular person and would get married and have a regular life. But that was not how God had planned it to be. But there is actually a difference between someone who loves you and someone who needs you.
Yeah.
With women, we have a way of flowing back and forth between love and need, and it's important because this is how we're made. For the men, they either need you or they love you, and there's a clear difference. But again, they use words interchangeably depending on what they think you want to hear.
Exactly what they think you need to hear.
So knowing me, he knew that I wanted to hear that word, that I love her.
Right.
And that would drag me into beyond what I could even imagine.
Yeah. But at a point, the picture the world saw was a former first lady always going to court.
And I didn't go to court. Again, there are a lot of perceptions and a lot of stories. Turbulent 6-year marriage, definitely. The whole idea of the kingship that is thrust upon our leaders.
Yes,
When they become president, you are seen almost like God. And you can do almost anything. And so the women, I think that was the only problem I had in my marriage, that there were many, many, many women. The children that are being born. And one woman goes out the door and 5 women come in. Yeah. That was a real Achilles heel for me. But I remained, went into exile, came back, and got involved in my political career. So the other times that I've been dragged to court have been political issues between the political party and myself, trying to make wrong decisions, and we're dragged to court. I think as a citizen of any country, where the key decisions are made and that sets the pace of what is right and what is wrong is the law. And so I've taken advantage of that at every point in time, because I think the law sets the standard, so no one thinks, oh, she's using her position. To force a problem or to correct a problem. So I have quite a few cases that have been taken to the Supreme Court as a way of deciding some of the issues. And people say she's very contentious because I've learned to speak for myself and to speak about the issues I believe in. And I wouldn't be the timid jewel that grew up in Liberia. When you become a politician, it's a whole different animal that's created as a result of that. So I don't let anybody get away with murder with me. I have to say my piece.
You have to say your piece. Yes. Let me take a break. When we come back, we'll get into how you've become this icon, this strong image when it comes to women empowerment and getting women to dare to go into positions of authority and leadership. You are the global chair of African Women in Leadership Organization. We'll get into that when I come back. Let me take a break by doing this before I go. Once again, let me say thank you to Adipa Fabrics for my, cloth. My dress, they call it Rich Auntie dress, by Liran Collections. Thank you so much. Makeup by The Global, hair by Insula GH, and of course my beads by Twinny Crafts. But let me once again say thank you to our sponsors. That is Old Mutual. I'll be back. Welcome back to TSP with Gifty Auntie, and we are having a conversation with Her Excellency, former Vice President of Liberia, Her Excellency Dr. Mrs. Jewel Taylor, former First Lady of Liberia, twice Senator, former Vice President. You know me, that I love women of power and of influence. So let me just go on and on about it. But again, we say thank you to our sponsor, that's Old Mutual. An Old Mutual retirement salary plan is here to stay. Now you can retire on your own terms with a guaranteed monthly income for the rest of your life. Yes, this is true. Simply invest a lump sum into the Old Mutual retirement salary plan today and start receiving monthly income to enjoy the perfect retirement. It is that easy. The best part is you get to enjoy added benefits on an annual basis and increase every year. Call Old Mutual on 050-453-4333, 050-453-4333, or visit www.oldmutual.com, or simply dial *789 *01# to request a call. Obrapa Ahoto Enkwa. We also say thank you to Vena Mineral Water, Bigo Drinks, Mrs. Oferipoko and the family, All Cuisine, House of Food. Thank you so much to you. Yep Cleaning Services, they make sure our environment is clean all the time. And of course, juice time, from the farm to the factory to the bottle to the shelf. They have the whole chain, and so you can trust that it is 100% when they see it's 100%. Your Excellency, of all the positions you've held so far, which one would you consider the most important? First Lady, Senator, Vice President?
Wow. And that's a tough question. Because I think each one has its own importance. Being First Lady put me on a political platform and allowed me to see and feel the heartbeat of the country that I would eventually come to serve without knowing that that was my path. Becoming senator made me the voice of my constituency, over 400,000 people. My constituency is in the heart of Liberia. We're in the center of the country. And so I became a senator without borders. I would visit all of the other areas, and senators would allow me to talk about some of the issues concerning their counties. But it made me see a different side. That side also allowed me to see the fact that women were so important in the political process. The issue is about votes. And if there is an important issue that's on the floor, if you have only 2 women or 3 women, the voices have to be very loud. And I think the platform of being a senator allowed me to become the strong Jewel Taylor that I am today. Because being wife of the president, you're just that. You're wife of the president. But it was at that point that I began to feel my own voice and make up my mind when others said, no, you're First Lady, what are you doing in the displaced camps? And I said, that is where the needs are. So my husband is involved in a war, because there was a war, civil war at the time, and I couldn't just sit by. And so each stage has given me a new level. But being senator for getting elected twice, I then realized that the voices of women are so important. Fortunately, at that time, we had a female president who insisted that whatever meetings, whatever consultations were called, the women were called from the back to the front. So then women began to speak. Women
so
began
she was intentional
about it. Because before, you would go to a meeting and all the men would sit around, and if there are women, they will be in the kitchen or they'll be standing outside of the hall, kind of listening in. But she insisted that their voices also had to come to the table. And I began to see the importance of that deliberate act by President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And then we begin to talk about more women coming on board. And it was important because even though those consultations were held, when the final decisions were being made at the legislature, because our numbers are still so small, the impact was very little. So those of us who had gotten elected had to be strong, had to be powerful, had to be knowledgeable, had to be intentional. So when you stood on the Senate floor, you had to know what you were speaking about. So I had to always study, get background information. And I would sit with my notes like a lawyer and say, when someone asked me a question, I said, no, this is what I said. You have to be intentional about the things that you did. So I grew into a strong woman because of the experiences. And then I become vice president. You know, vice presidents in most African countries is another nominal position. It's like being wife of the president.
Right.
The president is the head. He's the arrowhead. He sets the agenda. He sets the pace. And you have to sit back and just accept what was happening. So I found myself going backwards a little bit being vice president.
Right.
But I still, you know, I had learned by this time to have my say.
Right.
And so I was at the cutting edge of making a lot of people angry. What is she talking about? But when I saw issues that had to be spoken about, I knew it was not just about sitting in that seat as vice president, but as the first female vice president, the onus was on me to really push the women's agenda. And I did that under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, but I didn't renege on my promise to myself to be a voice of women. And so that is what I did. That didn't make me a happy camper. A lot of the ministers and some people in government felt that I was overreaching. But I said to them, when Ambassador George Weah was looking for a vice president, he saw a Jewel Howard Taylor, a strong senator. And he must have known that that strong senator would be the same strong senator as vice president.
Exactly.
And so I remained at that place.
You know, just remember the first time I appeared on TV, I was, you know, all sort of things were said about me. And my father said to me, when you get the opportunity again to go back on TV as a presenter, make sure you leave a mark, you make an impact. I kind of see that in what you are saying. How important is that for a woman who gets opportunity to be in the midst of a place where they think it's for the boys?
And if you don't do that, then you don't rise. As First Lady, I realized that there was an emergency humanitarian situation that I had to make an impact. They couldn't say Jewel Taylor, the First Lady, sat at home and watched TV with her sisters and drank wine and hosted people. So I went outside of the green to the place where I believe help was needed. Now, as Senator twice, we're trying to raise women leaders. We're trying to ensure that women leaders are on the cutting edge of all of the different issues. And what was important at that time was women's rights, women's responsibilities, sexual and gender-based violence, the issue of female genital mutilation, all of those critical issues. But because we had a female president, it was easy to make noise about it, to rally support, and to get her to come and say, yes, this is the right thing we needed to do. But the impact has to be made. The saddest thing a woman can do is to get to a place that you are given a platform to speak, for example, and you don't say anything, or you don't say anything meaningful, or you're given an opportunity to make a difference and you don't. What I chose, in addition to advocacy, which was talking and bringing people to the realization of the things that were happening, I decided that the girl child was at risk. And that was a decision I made as First Lady. A lot of girls didn't go to school at that time. If a family was poor and they had only a small amount of money, they would send the boys because they felt the boys were the backbone of the families. And so I decided I would create this NGO called the Starfish Foundation. It's 24 years old today. And we will send girls to school. Wow. But we will send girls to school only from the 7th grade, which is JSS 1 here in Accra. And it is at that stage that girls, they're still not grown, but they're still, they're moving from being a child into young adulthood. That's when the sexual abuse starts. That's when the early pregnancy comes in. That's when all of the different abuses are done. And so we felt that that was the place to start. Because in kindergarten to 6th grade, you will find out there are many more girls than boys. But by the time they get to 7th grade, the number drops. 8th grade, the number drops. 9th grade. By the time you get to 12th grade, those who started at 7th grade, maybe we've lost 40% of the young girls. They're forced into early marriage. They've had 2-3 children and they don't feel they can go back to school. So we're losing numbers. And so the foundation decided that we'll work on girls from 7th grade, which is JSS 1, to 12th grade and into the university. So we've done this for 24 years.
Wow.
Next December will be our 25th anniversary. And we hope you'll come and visit so you can inspire some of them.
I will come and visit. I would love to come. You know, I don't know if you know, but I have ties with Liberia. My 2 brothers were in Liberia. So I have nieces and nephews.
Oh, wow.
Yes, Sethina and Alfred, who are, you know, their mother was a Liberian, so I have ties with Liberia.
Good. Then it should be home for you too.
Yes, in 2008, I was there with President Kufuor as a journalist, you know, when we came round. You're watching TSP with a Gifty Auntie, and my guest has been Her Excellency Dr. Joel Taylor, former First Lady of Liberia, twice Senator, former Vice President, and before we end, we'll get into the next. We've had part of her childhood, her marriage, her First Lady role, and a bit of her senator. Next week, when we come back, we are going to get into her role as, yes, Senator, Vice President, and her passion now to see that women rise and take up their rightful position in positions of authority, politics, religion, market, entrepreneurial, wherever it is. So please don't miss next week's episode.
But there are things that divide us as women. If we make up almost 50% of the populations in our countries across the regions of the world, especially here on the African continent, can you imagine what we would do with our votes? But we'll be the champions for the males and leaving a woman on her own. Will be the women cheerleaders in the different communities saying, women, all women, let's vote for this man. That perception definitely has to change. Because if we would just come together and decide we're going to have half of the presidents in Africa to be women, we can do it by our sheer numbers. But they know that by the numbers we are stronger, but there's something that divides us. And I may not like what you look like. I may not like your dress. You may not like what I look like. You may not like the fact that I'm muffy. Like we used to say when we were growing up, my mother would say, you are too muffy. And some people say she talks too much, but I speak my heart and I go to bed and I sleep at night. But what are the things that divide us? We must find a way to begin to talk about it so that we can find a way to coalesce. Yeah. I mean, my prayer is that one day women across Africa, across our nations will rise up and raise up women senators and women parliamentarians in their numbers.